This is the IT or Information Technology Practical Exam, Paper 1 for November 2021 for Grade 12. And we have been dealing with all the questions so far. The links are in the description, but we are looking at the final question. We're at the final last question, question 4, which is the red question. So let's get into it. Before we get into this question, just understand the context of what this question means in terms of the whole exam paper. Most of the time, this is the last question that you're going to be doing. It's the question where you're going to be running out of time and you're going to be stressed. You want to maximize as many marks as possible. So your goal for this question is to just pretend that everything's going to work. Take that pressure off you. Your goal is not to get everything to work straight away. Your goal is to get as many marks as possible. If there is time left over at the end after you've done that, then we can look at getting all the marks and finalizing and making it all work. But your first goal is to get as many marks as possible in the time that is remaining. So maximizing that, because this is normally the difficult question. So get whatever you can. So here we got the last question. We're dealing with hikes this entire exam paper, and there's some hiking routes, and I think those are little checkpoints. I think they see is there are 5 checkpoints, and they're stored in a 1D array called array names. They're the different names. And then we've got the distances between the checkpoints on a trail in a 2D array. So there we go. So there's a 5x5 grid, and what they are trying to, as you can see there, so that's, you can see there's those zeros, I'm assuming is when Morgan's at 1 and Morgan's over here, the distance from Morgan to Morgan is going to be 0. But the difference from Morgan to Haga, I think it will be 6.2. I think that's how it's going to be read. So that's what we are looking for. So 4.1, write code to display the names and the checkpoints from the arrays and the distances to those 2 arrays. We will display them in neat columns in a rich edit, not a string grid, in a rich edit. So we're going to create that effect of like different columns using tabs, and you can see there the intersection between the 2 of them is 0, because obviously the distance from Morgan to Morgan is 0. So there we go. So the tabs and blank lines in the example output are included for readability and are not required. So we'll try to get it to look exactly like this, but that's what we want to try to do. So as you can see, so basically the idea behind this table is that the distance from Morgan to Beacon is 13.2, and if you went from Beacon this way to Morgan, you get that exact same value. So we want to display this. So whenever we display in a 2D array, I've always said your goal is to not display everything. Your goal is get that part, get the first row perfect, and then from there we can repeat that 5 times and see if it works. So that's our goal. So let's have a look at what we've got here. We've got the program running, or the program over here. So let's run and see what's available to us. There we go. So if we display, let's see what's this. So they've done the headings for us already for that part. We just need to do that first line. So we're going to do this following. So let's go double click on here, and yeah, they've done the headings, and that's great. And now we want to display just that first line. As I said, I just want to get that line first. So we want to get Morgan, which is in the names array at position 1. So I'm going to construct a string and set it up bit by bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it sLine variable. And that's the line. That's what we're going to do for each line. So that's going to be of type string. And I'm going to start off sLine to be equal to whatever the Morgan name is. The Morgan name is at position 1 of array name. So I'm going to set that by default to array names position 1. We initialize sLine to that. And then I'm going to add, well, I won't add the #9. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a #9 afterwards. I'm going to add a #9 value, because I always want to, I don't want to end with a #9. So I'm going to start with a #9 value. And we're going to get the first value, which is 1. And we'll look at, so 1, so there's 1, 6, and so on. So 1, 6, 9, 3.2. So all those values are going to be displayed. So let's see if we get the same thing. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to do a for loop, because we know there are 5 values. So for I equal 1, 2, 5, do. And let's just declare I as a looping variable. There we go. And so there we go. So what are we wanting to do every time? We want to take sLine, take whatever's currently in sLine, add a nice little tab, and then we want to get a value from array distances. We want to get a value from array distances, but which value? Square brackets. So there we go. Put square brackets around it. And we want to get those values there. Okay. So let's try 1, and we want to get 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want to go in position 1, and then we want to add 1, 1, and then we want to add 1, 2, and then 1, 3, and then 1, 4, and then 1, 5. So what variables going 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's my R variable. So let's put R there. Now these are what array distances. If we look here, they are an array of real. So to put them obviously in the string, we're going to have to convert them from float to string before we put them into the string. So we do that. And then if I'm happy with that, once the for loop is done, we can then say, okay, so then our rich edit q4.lines.add, and we're going to add sline. So my goal, as I said, was just to do the first line. So that's what this is doing, just doing the first line. Let's see if that works. Okay, so let's go have a look. Let's display. So does that look like what I want it to look? So let's come here and let's go over here. So let's go. Does that look like we want it to look? There we go. That is great. And to make that effect of that gap, I'm going to add at the end, I'm going to add a hash 13 so that we go to a new line. So that is technically working. So we got the first line working. Now that we got the first line working, I just want to keep doing that another 5 times. Technically, I just want to do that 5 times in total. All of the stuff I've just done, I want to do 5 times. So after S line, I'm going to add a hash 13. So it adds S line, goes to a new line. But watch what we're going to do. I want to do all of this 5 times. So I'm going to put all of this in a different for loop for j equals 1 to 5. Do you see the key to this question is get the first line working, and then we can just put a loop around it to say how many times we want to repeat doing that process, and we want to do it 5 times. So we're going to put a begin here, and we want to end over here. Everything we've just done must be inside of that loop. So I'm shifting everything up so we can actually see it, that it's inside the loop. The problem is I don't want to display Morgan 5 times. I want to display Morgan, then Hagar. So I want to go display 1, 2. So that 1 mustn't be a 1. It must be this j value because I want it to be j. And then the distances. Well, once I've done that row, I want to do that row and then that row. So that's also going 1, 2, 3. It's not just doing the first one every time. So that's also going to be that j value. So we're basically replacing all the ones with our outer loop now. And if we do that, let's see what it looks like. Let's go. We're going to display. And there we go. Is that what it must look like? There we go. It looks pretty close. I think that is exact. There we go. So it's displaying exactly like we wanted to display. And that's how I approach displaying a 2D array or doing a calculation with a 2D. Get the first row perfect. And once you do that, then you repeat that process 5 times. And all the ones that you had, because it was the first row, you replace with the looping variable that's going from 1 to 5 of everything. In this case, the j. Okay, so that's question 1.1 or 4.1. 4.2, they want some of the values in the distance chart in the array are rounded down to an integer value. These inaccurate integer values need to be replaced by the more accurate decimal value. So they give us, if you look at the data, you can see like there, you see that Morgan to Cinsa's 9.57, but if you go Morgan to Cinsa here, it's actually 9. So that's an inaccuracy. So we don't want that 9. We want to replace the 9 with the 9.57, if that makes sense. So it seems to be that this value always seems to be bigger or less than that value. Okay, I think there's another case. I think if you look, I looked at the answer. So 5 and 4. So I look at 5 and 4, that 15 is different to that 15 there. So those are the 2 errors that we're trying to pick up using code. The key is the 1, 3 is equivalent to the 3, 1. So 1, 3 is the equivalent to 3, 1, if that makes sense. So we're looking if that combination are not the same. And if they're not the same, then obviously we must identify them and display them. So I'm first of all going to try get the display correct, and then I'll work on doing where they are. So let's try to do that. So let's take it step by step, get the mark. So click on the button. To make my life a bit easier, I'm actually going to make a variable called rRow and rColumn for my loops, so that I can try to refer to which one at the time. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to loop, because we're doing each row individually, I'm going to loop for the row. And we know we're going from 1 to 5. Now, as I said, you're running out of time. Just put in your loops, see how you go. You might need to do some trial and error. End of the rRow loop. And then inside here, we're going to do another for loop, which is going to be rCol, which is also going to go from 1 to 5. Okay, so let's go and do this. So there's a couple of things we're going to do. So we're going to check out. So this is the end of the rCol loop. Okay, so what do we do? First thing we do, we need to check out if there's an inaccuracy. So if the array distances r row, comma r col, if that distance is not the same as the array distances, and we want the reverse gear of that, where r col and r, so when it was 1 3, we then going to look at 3 1s. So we're looking at r col, comma r row. That's what we're looking for. If they are not the same, then, so let's do this. So let's think about what we're going to do. This is the end of the if statement. So what do we want to do? Our distances, that must be distances. Okay, so if the distance is not right, then it's normally this one that is incorrect. It seems to be. Okay, it's always the first one that's incorrect. If it's incorrect, then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, if that's the case, then this one must be reset to that one. I'm going to test that out. If it doesn't work, then I'll just change the option. So r row, r col is now going to equal to that value exactly like it is, but on the other side, because it's not the same, then they're not equal to. So therefore we want them to be equal. So we're going to say r col is equal to r row. Let's just test that and see if that works. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to swap them around and put r col, r row here must equal to r row, r col. So let's try that. It's a lot. Sometimes when you're dealing with 2D arrays, sometimes if you don't understand 100% and you don't have time, just do some trial and error and see what happens. Okay, well, the first thing is we need to display the chart. So let's display. And there we go. Do you see it's fixed it? So that 9.7, do you remember this was 9.5? Well, that was that was just 9. That is now 9.57. And the other one was this 15. The 15, okay, so that's the problem. We want that one to be equal to that one. So that one is an issue. So what we can do instead, so we know it could be either option. So I can't just assume that this one's always going to be the better one. So we want it to be, if you look at the data here, so when we corrected it, if you looked at the original values over here, we always want the bigger number to replace the smaller number, technically, if you think about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, change this value to the bigger value of the 2. Does that make sense? So the max of that value, comma, and the other option would be, so whichever one's the bigger number, you use the max of that. So either the row col option or the col row option, if that makes sense. So give me the biggest of those two, if that makes sense. So that'll change it to the biggest. So it'll pick which one's the biggest and put that into that position. But if it's the other way around, we can just do the exact same thing. But technically we've changed it, so it doesn't make a difference. Because we've changed this one to be the biggest, then this one will be the biggest. So I can literally say, I hope you're staying with me with this understanding of the logic here. I can then say, so this one will now be the biggest of the 2, which if it was 9.5 or 9, it'll now be 9.5. Now I'm going to change r col, which is the other one, to this value, because we know this one's already the biggest because we just changed it to the biggest. So we're going to reset that one, the col row, to that value because we know that that one's the biggest. Now let's just test that one quickly. Let's see if it works. And we're going to say we display. We know that there's errors there and there and there, but if we do the validation and then display, that's all both 15.2 and both of those are 9.57. So that's working. That's great. Now we need to determine where are those positions. So now that we've corrected for each value is identified, replace, we've done the replace, but we need to display the position of the inaccurate values that were identified by their row and column number. So this one's a bit more tricky because now I actually need to find out which one was the lowest one. So I actually need to do a little check. So I almost need to change my code a little bit. As I said, we're getting the marks, but we need to change this. So there are two possibilities. Either this one is the biggest or that one's the biggest. So I actually can redo the max one. So let's just take it step by step. If this one is the biggest, if this is bigger, then r col. If that is bigger, then the exact same option, but where the column and the row are swapped. Then what are we going to do? Well, if that's the case, then we know that this one was the problem one. So then we're going to display like they've got that. We want to display square bracket, that number, and then what the new number is going to be. So that's what we do in that case. So then I can say, okay, well, if that's the case, then as we said, this one's the problem. So that's the one we must correct. So we are correcting this one to be equal to the row call. Why? Because we want the decimal. In other words, this one's the bigger one, so therefore this one's wrong. So change this one to that one, and we are going to say, okay, in that rich edit, rich.lines.add, we're going to add a square bracket plus where we're going to display those two values, the col and the row. Col plus a comma plus r row. It says yes, width and the new value. Then I'm going to say after that width and the new value, which the new value is going to be this new value, if that makes sense. As I said, you're running out of time, you're just trying to get the marks at this stage. So we know this is a float, so we convert it from a float to string and just display it. I'm not worried about decimals at this point, and we know those are integers, so we're going to make that a int to string for the col, and that's going to be an int to string for the row. That is the one scenario. Else, if it's not that scenario, else the other option is all of this again. However, in this case, the r row col r row is the bigger one compared to the two, which means this one is the one that is correct and that's the one that's wrong, which means you just swap all of these around, is equal to the r. So basically in this case, you just, all the r rows become r cols and all the r cols become r rows, and then you replace that with r row, and that becomes r col, and that becomes r col. I think that's going to be okay. And because we've allocated the values over there, we actually don't need to do this anymore. So I can take that out. We can put our semicolon over there. Let's test that. Ooh, it's a lot of extra work. Let's see if it works. So we are looking, if I display the chart, we are looking for 1, 3 is a problem and 5, 4 is a problem. That's what we're seeing. So if I click validation, 1, 3, 5, 4, and it's corrected. So we just want to put that square bracket on the other side, and we can see that it's correct. Okay, so there we go. So just over here, after we do that part there, don't forget to add a square bracket there after the width, just to get it perfect. Okay, so there we go. I actually looked at the memo, and the memo isn't this complicated, but I think that's how I understand it. I think that works for me. Okay, so there we go. So that's all 4.2. So let's go to 4.3, which I think is the more difficult question of the lot. So let's go have a look at it. 4.3. The hikers can select one of the routes listed in the routes combo box, and the hiker must select a possible route, and this is what the routes look like. So it's all the numbers from 1 to 5, but in different orders. It means that the hiking trail starts at a beacon point, checkpoint, and the route then continues towards in that order. So the third one, the first one, the second one, the fifth one, if that makes sense. Okay, the itinerary needs to be compiled and displayed. Write code to do the following. Extract the route from the combo box. Display the selected route in the rich edit. Use the information in the names array to display the names and the checkpoints in the array for the distances. Determine and display the approximate time. Ooh, this is a lot of work. It will take to complete the hike between the checkpoints. Use the following: 20 minutes for 1 kilometer. So we're going to have to get the distances as well. It's double the time if it's a rocky route, and those are the 2 rocky routes. So if it's a 4 or a 2, then we must double the answer. If the total time spent for one day is more than 8 hours, the hike must stay overnight at the checkpoint. The names of the overnight checkpoints must be displayed. Calculate and display the total distance of the hike. Wow, this is quite an intense question. And again, as I said, you're running out of time. You're just going to do what you can. So first of all, so we know for Beacon to Sinsa, so number 4, if you double checked here, is Beacon. 4 to 3 is Beacon to Sinsa. Okay, so we're going to get the first name and go to, and then we're going to work that out. So let's just take it step by step. Let's do that. Okay, so let's try this. This is a challenging question, but we can do it. We can do it. So let's go across here. They're going to get it from that combo box. So there we go. I'm going to double click on this, and we need to get the value from the combo box. So I'm going to make a variable called sRoot of type string, and that's going to get the value from that combo box. Combo box roots dot text. So we know which one is selected. So we're going to assume it's going to be something like this: 4, 3, 1, 2, 5. Something that looks like that. Okay. First of all, we want to get the first name because we want to display the first name to the second name. So we want to get the first two. Let's just get that. Let's see if we can display that correctly, and then we can move on from there. So let's do that. Break it up into little bits. So we know that we want to get the first root. So I'm going to make some integers here because I need to get that as a number. So I'm going to get a r first and an r second of type integer, and I'm going to not first. R first is equal, I keep on putting an O instead of an R there. That one is equal to copy from the string sRoot, starting at 1 for 1 character. That's going to be that one. And we're going to convert that from a string to an int, so it converts that 4 into the actual number 4. Does that make sense? So in that case, it's going to be a 4. Do we understand that? Copy. Now, the second one, the second root, the second option is going to be the exact same, but we're starting at position 3, and that'll be the 3. So starting at position 1, 2, 3, copy for 1 character. So we've got, this is a 4, that's a 3. So now I can get my string that I'm going to display, sline. Sline is equal to the first option, which is going to be array names. R first. I keep on putting this O in the middle of nowhere. Jeepers, Mr. Long. That O is like haunting me. So that's going to get the first one's name, and then I'm going to add the text TO. There we go. So we're going to put in the text TO, add that, and then we're going to add the array names of the R second one, if that makes sense, and then a colon. Plus a colon. Let's just see if we can get that right, and then we're going to display that in the rich edit. Lines.add sline. I just want to see if I can get that working. We want to display the root at the top, so display root planner. So 1 to 2 is Morgan to Haggai, so that is working, but we just want to display root and the option with the space at the top. So we can do that to get the mark. So we got the root, so we're first going to display. Once we've got the root, we're going to display the root plus a hash 13. So just do that at the top. Okay, so we got that working. Now I need to get the distance. So the distance would be a real number. Our distance is of type real. And to get that distance, we need to go from 4 to 3. So if I go look here, the fourth option, the third, will get me that 9.63. Do you see that? That's what I want. I'm going to go and add to sline. So sline over here. Sline is equal to sline. Take that whole thing that we've done before and then add array distances at position R first, comma R second. But we want to convert that from a real float to a string so that it can fit in there. Does that make sense? Float to string, Mr. Long. There we go. Slowly but surely we are building that first one little bit, and then we'll see how we go from there. So root planner from Morgan to Haggai. So let's try that 4-3 option, because we know that's going to be 9.63. Let's put a little space there. So we got that first bit going. That's making progress. We are making progress. So we've got that. Then we want a bracket after that, and then the minutes, which is the distance, 20 minutes times by the kilometer. So that's times by 20. So that makes sense. So we times that by 20, and that's what we should get. So there we go. So let's do that. After the distance, we're now going to add sline is equal to sline plus a bracket, space bracket, plus the distance or the time. So I'm going to make a variable called r time, which is also going to be a real. There over here. R time, and R time, I'll work it out first. our time is equal to whatever this distance is multiplied by 20, because it's 20 minutes for each kilometer. So we're going to add that, and then we're going to add the R time, and then add the bracket at the end, and then we'll add a hash 13 because we want to go to the next line. But this must be converted from a float to a string. Slowly but surely wins the race, Mr. Long. Slowly but surely wins the race. So we're going to do that, and we're going to pick the 4-3 option, and there we go. So we work in, we get in there. The only difference is we want the word minutes at the end, but everything's perfect. Thank goodness, everything's perfect. We get in there, slowly but surely. So add the word minutes at the end of this. Minutes, space, so like that. Okay, so we've got the first line going, and then it's done. So all of this works for the first line. So once we've done that, we then want to do that, and then we want to do that. So basically, I'm going to delete the first 2 characters. Once I'm done with this, delete from sroot for 1 to 2 characters. So sroot over here is now going to look like this. So now that becomes my root. If I double check, so we go from there to there. So that becomes the new number 1, and that becomes the new number 2. So now that I've got that, I can literally repeat this whole process again, because that now becomes 1, that becomes 2. So I'm going to repeat this how many times? So we're going to do it 1. So we've done it once, then 2, then 3, then 4. Do you see? We're going to do it 4 times. So I'm going to do this 4 times, Mr. Long. 4 times. All of this code is going to be done 4 times. And then end it there. So this is the end of the for loop. Okay, does that make sense? So we extract those 2, we work it out, and then we're going to delete that. Then we're going to do that and that as 1 and 2, and then we do that and that as 1 and 2, and then we do that and that as 1 and 2. So let's make a R variable at the top. Let's see if it repeats the process at least. I want to at least see that the sequencing is correct. So they try 4, 3, 1, 2, 5. So 4, 3, 1, 2, 5. So that's the one that we're doing. First of all, let's just double check what it looks like. Okay, so we do get the sequencing correct. That is all good. And we've got the distances correct. That's good. The problem is, when do we work out the booked at? So we need to keep track of the times. Okay, and are those times correct? I think those times are correct, but we haven't worked out. I think we must be careful of when it's double the time, but we'll come to that now. But we'll get to it. So let's go back to the question here. If the total time spent hiking for 1 day is more than 8 hours, then we need to do this whole booked at that venue. So that's what we need to do. So I need to work out the total time. 480 minutes is the max. So I'm going to have a total time variable, or total time, which we are going to initialize at the very beginning. Get the marks. Initialize it to 0. Okay. And then every time we work out the time, we are also going to say our total time is equal to our total time plus this new time that's been added. Okay. If that value is greater than 480, then we need to book in to a venue, which means we need to rich lines.lines.add. We need to add in the words book at. Okay, so book at. Now, which one? We book at the one that we just at. Book at the second one's the name. So we're going to say book at array names at our second. And I think we do that at the end after because we're going to display the line. So we're actually going to do that over here after we've displayed the line. So we display it here. So let's try that and see what that looks like. And now I've got extra hash 13s, which I'm messing with my sequencing. But let's see. That's the one we like. Display at booked at Haga. That's good. So it's moving on. Okay, that's great. So we are slowly but surely getting it correct. Do you see that? We are slowly but surely. We are getting the correct results and all that. But we need to work out the total distance now. The total distance is, okay, so there's the distance. So the total distance 38.3. So we got to work out the total distance. So every time we get a distance, we must add it together. So let's go do that. So we're going to go here to the code and we're going to have a total distance variable now. Our total distance, which we also will initialize. Our total distance will be set to 0. And every time we get a distance, we're going to add that distance to the total distance. So our total time is here. Our total distance is equal to our total distance plus this distance that they just walked. Okay. And then at the end of everything, once the loop has been done, then we can say redq4.lines.add, and they want me to display total distance and then the number with kilometers. So total distance plus the r total dis plus the word kilometer. But we must convert this from a float to a string. We can do the decimal places later. So let's just get that working, and we're going to put that on a new line. So I'm going to say plus #13 plus that. So just #13 plus that. Okay, so let's run that and see what it looks like. It should work for that scenario. We should be very close here. Do we get the same results as them? Do we get the same results? Okay, obviously our spaces are a bit awkward, but we get the same result. We would probably display it to one decimal place, but those are all correct, those are all correct, those are all correct. So let's try a different route. Let's try the 2, 4 option. So we're going to go here and try 2, 4, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5, that one. And we're going to display the route planner. Does it give us the same results? Okay, so this one's slightly incorrect with our times, and that's probably because we haven't done the double. We get the same total there. We get the right bookend, or no, we're going to have to do another bookend. We have to do 2 bookends. Okay, so there's 2 things to take note of here. First of all, we need to keep track of, it takes double the time to walk the same distance on a rocky route, so between 2 and 4. So if it's between 2 and 4, it's going to take double the time. This is getting very complicated. So when I do the total time, here's where I worked out the total time. So that's the total time. However, if r first equals 2 and r second equals 4, so if it's between 2 and 4, they said, between 2 and 4, then we're going to take that r time that they've worked out over there, and we need to double it. R time is equal to r time times about 2. Okay, remember we put brackets around this. That's the one scenario. If it's between 2 and 4, double the time. Else, and I'm going to copy this because there's a second scenario. That's from 2 to 4, but what happens if it's from 4 to 2? Then we also double the time. And that should fix that issue. And when we are doing the, if it's greater than 140, then we say the bookend. So what I'm going to do here, when they've booked in, I'm going to reset the total time to 0, so that if they take too long with the next couple of routes, that it will also give them a double booking. So that will now reset to 0, because that'll be a brand new day, and that time will accumulate until it gets to 480, and then they will need to book again. So that's the other change I'm going to add, and let's see if that works. This is a very long question, so let's try it. So we still get the correct results for this one, route planner. Boom, we still get the correct results. However, if we go to the 2145, I think it's that one. So let's go look here. 2435, 2435, that one, and we go route planner. Do we get the same results? We get the same total. We get the same there. We book it Cinsa, we book it Granubi. I would just need to play around with my #13s and that to make sure that it looks like that, but at least the data is correct. That was very complicated. I hope you understood what I was trying to do there. For a 30-mark question, we were doing about 40 minutes. It was a bit too long. But yeah, as I said, in those questions, as I said in the last question, when you are struggling to do all of this, you are just trying to get the marks. Did you notice how I broke that question into little bits? Get little bits done and keep adding, keep adding. If they say time's up, you've done what you can. But you just keep accumulating marks, and you would have accumulated marks as you get on and you move on. So there we go. That's how that question's done. Make sure that you go through the questions, make sure that you give it a try and see if you can get it right yourself. For other exam papers to practice, go to our YouTube channel, click on the playlist option and see topics available there, as well as lessons on all the things that you need to learn for your RT Prac exam. Support the channel by subscribing, and remember, don't do it the long way, do it the Mr. Long way.